Welcome, everyone, to episode 6 of the Real Profit, Real Perspective podcast, What Not to Do with Your Money. I'm Connor Malatesta, managing partner at Markoff and Malatesta CPAs, and I am joined by my favorite co-host, Ryan Bannister, owner of One Up Advisors. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm also your only co-host, so
Look, they don't need to know that through process of elimination, you are the one, the only co-host, but you are my favorite.
hey, I'll take what I can get, at least. We'll roll with it.
God knows we spend enough time trying to get people to respond to other things. It's nice to get a little bit of a positive affirmation from
I say, I'm
time to
not going to
time.
hate on any compliments over here.
It's the old just shut up and take the compliment. So Ryan, what have we decided to talk about today? I bet nobody can tell by the title of this episode.
Well, yeah, if you haven't figured it out yet, we are going into what not to do with your money.
Business money, personal money, that money you got squirreled away under your mattress because you don't want the IRS to know that it's there, or the stuff that you got buried in the backyard. This is what we pretty much said internally is the episode about here's all the real mistakes we've seen people make that we've made, and the things that sometimes it feels as if we're screaming into the void to get people to stop doing.
Yeah, and get them to stop doing it, or what we did to fix some of these things, or if it was undoable, what we would have done differently potentially. So there's a lot of room to improve some things around here.
Spoilers, all of the unable to stop what's already happening usually ended with a phone call that said you need to talk to a bankruptcy attorney, which just sucks for everyone. Those ones are awful.
That's just generally unfun all around.
Even though we weren't individually involved in that, it's still having to just be in that situation. It's amazing how much just indirect stress you pick up, but nobody really wants to hear us complain about all the stress that we went through when we had to tell people, yeah, you need to go file for bankruptcy because
Right.
you're out of money. It's done. It's over. It's done. They say there's no such thing as failure, but bankruptcy court sometimes is kind of your final destination there.
Yep.
So let me ask you, because I know I spent a lot of time talking about businesses, but let's start with the personal stuff. When you're talking to people, dealing with everyone with their personal finances, the things you've seen, the secrets that people confide for the stuff they don't do, the things they know they should be doing. What's kind of the biggest mistakes you've seen clients and other people make when it comes to their finances and just their money in general?
Yeah, man. I love the question of what would you tell someone to stop doing immediately if you could just pick one thing. And that's what I've loved about, what the work I focus in as far as personal finance goes, but also on the bookkeeping and accounting side for solo businesses and, partnerships, smaller entities, things like that. But I find that both of those things can have similar stop doing this right now. And narrowing it down to one thing, I would have to say stop tracking your income and expenses through only Zelle and PayPal. And maybe that's just because that's a sore wound from a recent job we were doing, but it gets really hard for us and for you, when you're managing your income through Zelle and you have to look back at a transaction that happened this time last year and figure out what it actually was for. That's just a minor gripe.
Go, please tell me how you really feel about this.
Yeah. And, I think that's like the next step up from that would be, tracking your income in a spreadsheet if you're going to go shy of like an accounting software. But that part's neither here nor there, just griping.
I mean, that's look, 40% of the job is just griping after the call of, oh my God, I can't believe we have to deal with this again. we when I talk to clients that have really messed up situations, everybody is there's usually a degree of embarrassment, which, for from our point of
Right.
view, as we tell everyone, we're not judging you, and truly, even though we will use these as lessons, we're not truly judging the clients that come to us in their different situations and everything. This is called coping, uh, coping through humor of going through this, because we really personally, we don't judge, because we see a whole range of client situations. So I wanted to get kind of a disclaimer out of the way of, look, if you're in this situation
Yep.
and you feel as if we're really ripping on you, it's not so much ripping on you as it is just a, please stop doing it because there's better ways to do it. Or if you do make things really, really, really funny, you will be anonymously referenced in our stories as a cautionary tale for everybody else. And nobody wants to be the cautionary tale. Everyone wants to listen to the cautionary tale.
Right. And it takes me back to a stat I think I picked up when we were both in public. And I think it goes something along the lines, if a spreadsheet is over 100 lines, there's a 99% chance it has an error somewhere in it, which therein lies the reason I'm telling you to not do that to track your income, because that is something very important and we don't want an error in that. So, it's not just simply complaining for complaining's sake, but there's a reason behind it too. So,
And why is tracking your income so very, very important? I feel as if you're kind of alluding to something we may have mentioned in our previous episodes about the fundamental rule of business.
yeah, rule number one, baby. You got to make money.
And an important part of that is knowing how much fucking money are you making. I my
Yep.
my personal gripe. I've got some more. Uh, I've got some actual learning lessons kind of in store for in a few minutes. But my personal favorite is when we talk to clients and I ask them the question, well, how much money are you making? And then the response I get is, I don't know. Go, okay.
Yep.
Um, how much did you make in revenue last month? Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'd have to go look at things. You you do work for money, though. I mean, you're here to make money. Now, maybe it's because I'm biased as an accountant, and we just love looking at fucking numbers because that's just what truly delights us. As a child, I was putting together Excel spreadsheets. Um, just for enjoyment. That's a lie. I was not. I am totally making this up right now.
Okay, you don't have to backtrack.
No. You don't know. I was cool as a child. I got just way nerdier as an adult. There was a point in time where I was cool. Not any time in the last decade. But I have talked to clients where they say, I have no idea how much money we made last month or last year, and
Yeah.
to me it really is a, well, don't you want to know? Shouldn't we know how much money we're making or losing? And it's there's been some people where we walk them through and explain it, and it's almost a paradigm shift in how they view the business. Of I think the way it was explained to me when I first got started is that a lot of new business owners will, and I know personally you're going to talk about this as well, but they treat the business like a wallet, where so long as there's cash in the bank, they think they're doing great. And that's all they care about. If there's money in the bank, we're doing good. Doesn't really matter how much we made last month. If I've got cash, I'm doing good. And that's usually more what new business owners do that haven't been burned yet.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean that's the total difference between knowing whether you're profitable or whether you have positive cash flow or not. And those are two very important distinctions. So, I mean,
So how
as
do you
long
see
as you
that?
are generating positive cash flow, like, yeah, I mean, you're not doing bad in by any means, but
So in terms of the personal side, right? We know businesses like to spend a ton of money, and I mean my usual my first blanket advice to everybody when they go, well, what should I be doing with the business? Usually it's stop spending fucking money. Just stop. So how relevant is the phrase Stop spending so much of your fucking money. Relevant on the personal side of things with
Yeah,
what you see.
I'm glad you brought it up, man, because that's one thing I did want to bridge is the rule number one of business is the exact same thing as personal. Like you have to make more money than you spend. Otherwise, you're living on borrowed time and borrowed money, literally. So that is kind of a segue too from my point of like how you track your income and expenses. That also applies maybe more so on the personal side because if you're profitable in the business and that's making money, that has to translate somewhere on the personal side too, because if your business is not serving you, then there's something that's not right. Like if you're getting a salary like from your business, if you're an S corp or something and getting a monthly salary, let's say, and you then it just goes into a black hole. You don't know what your mortgage or rent or your utilities are that you're paying every month. So you think kind of the opposite, like, as long as I've got cash in the checking account, it's all good. But yeah, I think that applies to almost exactly on the personal side. And especially it mixes a lot when you get into like the retirement savings and investing from your business. Like if you're at year end and you're looking at doing a profit sharing contribution to your 401k, for example, you've got to know on both ends, like how, if your business is profitable enough to make that contribution, and then how does that affect you on the personal side too? So it's all intermingled, right? Like, especially if you are a solo business, I mean, that is like you and the business are the same thing. So,
But Ryan, isn't it your job to tell all of your clients what they should be doing with all of their money? Isn't that what you exist to do? Is to tell them everything that they need to be doing with their expenses and budgeting and all of that stuff? Why should they be looking at all of that when you are there?
I'm glad you asked. So, actually, I was talking to somebody yesterday who put this in a great way. Like he likes his clients to be 80% creatively minded and 20% business. So I think that same sentiment kind of applies where like, yeah, I'm definitely here. Like that's what you're paying me for to help you on that. But that 20% business slash finance minded, you have to also understand what you are doing. And I say that like in the event, if we ever stop working together or something happens, or I don't know, eventually people go a different way for some whatever reason. So if you wind up on your own or just for the fact of knowing and understanding what you're investing in, where your money's going, and how much you make and save per month, you have to know that stuff. Just like you have to on the business side, even if you never want to become me or like a financial pro on that stuff, like you got to understand it.
It seems to me that there's a particular word that starts with an A that I almost want to say was almost a title of an episode that becomes relevant when it comes to your own finances, in that you as the individual still have to be accountable for everything that happens. I think we both would be in agreement that one mistake we do see a lot of people make, and we could particularly tie it back to when we had to do financial audits when people would start to outsource work, is that there is a tendency, particularly when you have a lot of things going on, to just take that little bundle of problems, hand it to somebody else, and
Yep.
say, this is your problem now. I'm not going to think about or deal with it. I'm going to pay you money, and this is entirely what you have to deal with, which to an extent is correct for many, many of our clients, but there is still that core fundamental element of you cannot give us all the liability and
Right.
all the accountability for what you're doing. It is still your life and your money. Uh,
Yeah. I heard a term for that exact thing last week or sometime recently. So sort of, I think it shows what we're getting at, that us as your accountant or your financial advisor, we are helping you outsource that function of your life. So you don't have to focus on it, but you still have to understand it, like we said. So what you're describing is management by abdication versus management by delegation, which
Mm.
it's, self-explanatory a bit, but one, you are just letting another person completely do this thing and not taking any responsibility for it just to get it off your plate. And by delegation, you are you're still at the top of the decision chain and responsible for what happens and what is decided.
I think we could probably condense all this down into the learning lesson being you cannot just give away your ownership of your finances. I think is a big
Yeah.
one that we see clients make. Besides the spending too much or not having the appropriate systems, and we'll get into why that's important. But I think the biggest issue that we see most people make, odds are, I mean, I'm guilty of taking things, handing it to somebody else and saying, this is your problem, deal with it now.
Oh,
And then
100%.
usually what ends up happening is that then I go, oh yep, delegated too much and now I gotta fix it. Shit. But taking portions of this and just handing it off is one of the, I think, biggest mistakes we see. uh, I see business owners make, you see individuals make. Business owners in particular, they always have that slippery slope of, because you want people to do things for you to free up your time.
Mm-hmm.
But the first, and this is probably more relevant from a how to be a good manager discussion that we should make a note to talk about into the future, is handing away too much and not checking up on things or making sure that things are progressing how they should be, and then wondering, oh my god, why is everything keep ending up on fire? Why is it a constant catastrophe? I'm constantly getting blindsided with these things. I didn't know what was going on. It's like, well, yeah, because you just took the part that you need to own and handed it off to somebody else. You expected your accountant, for example, to care more about your business than you do. We can care as much about your business as you do, but nobody is ever going to care more about your business, your family, your personal situation more than you should. If somebody does care more than you do, well, now you've got a mismatch in priorities there, which is probably something you should take a closer look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really, I think it just hits the nail on the head, man. Like it, especially, I'm a little biased on the personal side because you are using this to literally pursue like your dreams and your goals, right? Like the things you want to do. So you've got to be 100% behind that. Otherwise, like you can't expect somebody else to get you there. And that's sort of, I think, the behavioral aspect of finance where, I can help you put the tools and systems in place, but you physically have to go implement strategies that I recommend for you. So it's that collaboration that gets us both what we want. you
I,
know?
I know we've been doing some R&D research on the side of a kind of a Ratatouille type remote control that goes onto the head thing to really help our clients make good decisions. Unfortunately, the technology hasn't seemed particularly scalable and has also not gone over well when it starts pulling out hair. So until we manage to perfect that technology and can quite literally steer people like Ratatouille, like you got a little rat up there.
Little chef.
Yeah, that little known movie. There's such a core component of it that is, you gotta, every motivational video out there that you could probably listen to talks about, you have to do the work, and it's the same thing for this. Is you gotta own it, you've got to just do it and not really hand it away. And a lot of times
Right.
when we, going back to your initial venting about Zell and things like that, one thing I've noticed, and I'm sure you can elucidate on this a little bit more, particularly on the personal side, is going to that emotional component of money. Because I think no matter what, when it comes to money, everyone gets emotional about it. There's always an emotional component to money. I'm speaking frankly, I'm pretty good at cutting my emotions out from when I deal with money. Partially it helps that we're
Hmm.
constantly looking at numbers, so it's all just the fucking numbers that go up and down after a certain point to us. But there's still, it's usually the when things are good, it's not overly terrible and you're not really thinking about it. It's when that things hit that crunch period that things get, that's when the emotions and that kind of that crisis feeling and stress really starts to make itself known. Have you, what's kind of your advice when you're working with individuals of how to work on managing that emotional component, particularly in the context of personal finances? Because I think oftentimes when you're a business owner, it's a little easier to have more of a compartmentalization between business finances and personal finances. But then when you really get into the personal side, what does it usually look like for you when you're working with clients when it's that emotional component to their personal money?
Yeah, it's particularly relevant in today's circumstances where, like, well, at the time we are filming this, we're in the midst of fun current events with tariffs and market fluctuations, things like that. And, I won't go into the economics of that stuff, but the emotion side of it is very, very real. And I like how you separated, I think you can compartmentalize the business side, but when you get to the personal, you see 401k stamped on your account and you're like, instantly associate that with your future retirement. You're like, okay, this has quote unquote like gone down 10%. What does that mean for me like 20 years from now? So,
Oh my God, I'm losing money right now, even as I'm looking at this, as they watch
yeah.
the fair value drop and that stress feeling creeps in.
Yeah, and I mean, I see headlines that from all this stuff where it's like the Dow tumbles today, or they use the buzzwords, but in reality, things only fell like 1%. So it's like emotionally charging in that way too. But what I've found and what I recommend, at least like in working together, that already helps separate those because you have me to either be your like bad, I call it bad decision insurance sometimes. Like you have me to bounce these things off of, like, hey, should we do something right now because the market's down 10%? And even
Everybody
in,
knows you always sell at the bottom.
yeah. Sell low, buy high.
Have you haven't been reading Wall Street Bets, have you? I exclusively get all my investing advice from the Wall Street Bets subreddit.
Gotta love it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's one way, having that third party who is unbiased, at least, to help you talk these things through and bounce these ideas off of. But I think the more important aspect of it is knowing your your values and your goals, more importantly. Like this portfolio or this savings account, its function is to get me to this goal in X amount of time. So we build it to achieve that particular goal. So if that thing, if that goal is, 20 years away, say it's like your retirement, or that's when you hit your financial independence number, fun things like that, you know that when things are going down or up, either way, like we're still trending towards this end goal, if I'm explaining that well enough. But
I
I
think you're doing a pretty good job. I dare say. I mean, a lot of times because I occasionally will have clients that'll ask about the personal side as well. And one of my first questions is, well, do you need the money right now? Like right now? And they'll go, well, no. And I'll say, okay, well, why do you care? This is money in 20 years from now. Why do you care right
yeah,
now? Particularly if you don't need the money right now. Well, if you need the money right now, well, that's a different discussion, and also things are going to end up being various shades of bad. I mean, that was the when you go back to the 2008 um, great financial crisis. That's what
hmm
burned a lot of people. My God, where the not to sound classist here, but there's no way to get around sounding classist, which is the wealthy that did not need to touch those investment portfolios for day-to-day living expenses were able to ride out, and in some cases, if they had cash, put money in when things plummeted.
yep,
And so the temporary drop in the market from the financial crash didn't really impact them directly in terms of net worth because they didn't need to touch those investments in order to live on that money and, lock in those losses, literally selling at the bottom. The problem became when you had middle class and upper middle class households that needed that money to literally survive. They
right,
had no other opportunities for funds because of everything going to shit. And that is, what starts to wipe out wealth building in households. Not to get, overly depressing here, but that just ends up being the kind of the realization there of at times you wonder, how do we go through these crashes and the rich get richer, as they say, so to speak. And it really comes down to, did they need to pull that money out or not? Because if they didn't, then just because the portfolio was down doesn't actually mean anything. You can just let it ride.
yeah,
And as I've told people, they say, well, all the trade wars and tariffs and other things and that, and well, what if the US government goes insolvent, and what about my money? And that's what I tell them. Look, if the US government collapses, you do not need to worry about your retirement, because odds are you probably aren't going to live long enough to have to worry about retirement, because the entire global order has collapsed and now we're all in a
and
doomsday
things
situation.
are gonna look way different.
That kind of morbid dark humor that's used to cope for things, but it really is the reality of,
Yeah,
if the global economic system collapses, don't worry about your retirement. You're going to have other things to worry about, like the
yep.
bandits that are trying to eat you.
But I think the reframing helps it as well, and like as a third component to that of dealing through these things, and being at a market downturn or a little dip. If you've got the cash, I mean, a lot of times that can be a good move to continue on your plan and keep investing, like put more in at that time, because you only get so many of the dips where you're going to get that little bonus
Hmm.
return, and then I don't know, nobody can tell the time or how low it's going to go or how high, so it's uncertain in that. But long term, if you think you can put a little bit more in now and get that extra bit of return, that plays out very well in the long term.
It is, and when you really, every headline out there wants to talk about how this is going to be, the end of things and all that, mostly because all of them are clamoring to get people to tune in. But
Click.
odds are,
Mm-hmm.
given time, we will get through things. And I think one thing that I've had to talk through with a lot of clients, and this is going to sound a little more, what's the phrasing that I want to use here? Therapeutic, I don't think is the kind of phrase I want to use, but there is, depending on who you're listening to, a very big focus on listening to your feelings, and your feelings on things are valid, and they exist in those kinds of sentiments. And I'm not coming in here to say that all of those are totally invalid, but in the context of money, generally, when your emotions come into it, whether it's for the business, the personal, your retirement account, whatever it is, the moment your emotions come into your decision making process about your money, you are getting ready to fuck up. I've seen it time
Yep.
and time again. I've been there. Usually it's the worst when things are the tightest and you have to be the most disciplined. When I was first starting
Yep.
out the business, I had periods where I'm sitting there going, I've barely got enough money to make payroll. We're just getting by month. And it is a terrifying, an absolutely
Hmm.
horrific feeling of being there. The problem is that what happens, and I've seen it in myself, so I am truly speaking from experience on this one, is that you in a weird way start to revert to your baser instincts,
Hmm.
and you almost start to become very instinct driven in the decisions that you're making. That's why, for example, you may see in some businesses things start going bad and senior leadership makes the decision to axe 40% of the workforce,
Yeah.
not for a, well, we know we've got a fundamental sales problem or we have overhired, but we're losing money. I need to fire people. That
Hmm.
is the gut instinct of, I have to cut costs. I have to cut costs. We have to cut costs. We have to
Yeah.
fire people. And then a few weeks later, followed up with, also, we want to grow this year, so everybody's going to have to do more than the what was going on before with half of the team that we had. And why are we suddenly having a bunch of turnover? But
Hmm.
it's an understanding that your emotions really cannot affect your decisions that you are making when it comes to your money, or you're going to make mistakes and bad things at that
Yep.
point will happen. And I know I'm going to give you a moment here to talk about the kind of personal side, but it's one that, I spend a lot of time trying to talk clients through on how not to panic, or panic but don't do something irreversible and stupid.
Hmm. Yeah. And there's a couple things that come to mind from that. Like sometimes I think doing something could be worse than doing nothing at all. And the other part of that for me is like knowing yourself and setting those boundaries financially. Like if you get emotional, like I've seen people with personal rules of like I don't make financial decisions after 10 p.m. at night because you're not in the right state, and I don't know, like you just need time to think about it, or like a 24-hour rule or something like that. There's those little limits you can set to counteract the emotions that go into it. Like if I really want to buy a new pair of shoes, if I still want them this badly 48 hours from now, then I'll get
Hmm.
them, you know?
Or if you're in the
So,
mental state where you're drafting up an email to your accountant at 4 a.m, you
yeah.
should take a step back, take a breather, either have a drink or don't have a drink, depending on how that might go. But if this is all true. I've gotten those 4 a.m. emails from clients that I knew were panicking, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
got through it. I think the big thing, uh, we can probably, we'll make a mental note here to have an entire episode on mental health and in work life balance and all that, and what there's a lot of people out
Yeah.
there that I think that make, they try to make being in business or being in these kinds of situations look a lot sexier than it really is. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've never felt as if the whole process has been sexy. I have usually felt it's been messy and I don't know what I'm doing, and oh my god, I just have to constantly fight down the feelings of panic, because are we going to be in business next week? I
Right.
still, I'm pretty certain that survival feeling has been, oh, what's the phrase, traumatized into me. Never gonna let that one go. But
Yeah.
I had a point that I think I may have just lost.
Yeah. Well, I think it can happen on both ends too. Like if you're, at the point of bankruptcy or like a very bad thing that's happening on the horizon. Or if you're super successful, you can have the same thing. You see it with like pro athletes all the time. They outspend themselves and they're making huge bucks, but as soon as like 2 years out of the NFL, they're broke. So it can happen on both ends when you get too wrapped up in things. And I think
Go
that's
ahead.
why it's important to have some sort of separation, like another one of us who can help you, or
Mhm.
whatever you got to do to get to that point.
Yeah, I think our second big lesson here is, and I know some of this when you start to hear, oh, here's finance tips for businesses, and there's a lot of spend less money, track your income. And I think what we wanted to do is really get more into the heart of the things that drive the symptoms that a lot of those types of lists are attempting to
Hmm.
fix. When you're in that crisis situation, a lot of people, when they recount the stories of how they got through it, it seems as if it was a lot smoother than it really was. A lot of times,
Yeah.
when we tell clients the only way to get through it is getting through it, that means having the nights where you're awake until 3 in the morning, panicking about the next day because of what's going on. And you've got to get up and make more decisions. You're gonna have that. That's what it's going to look like when you're in those kinds of situations. Really, the big thing is not falling into the panic and still remaining just disciplined enough, just restrained enough that you're not. I think the way I word it is you're not on autopilot for the decisions you're making, where when you go through and you make a whole bunch of decisions and you're doing a whole bunch of stuff, and then it's you almost have a moment of clarity where you look back and go, why the fuck did I just do all this? What was I thinking?
Yeah.
That's the autopilot where you're suddenly looking back and go, I don't know what I was thinking. It seemed like I was operating off of instinct, and it's just trying to keep yourself pulled enough back that you don't slip into that, because that's where honestly the real mistakes end up being made, where you then have to do the real damage control, is really falling into
Yeah.
that.
And it's definitely different for everyone, but how would you say, like, how have you seen, or what would you do to keep yourself from crossing that line?
Oh, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like, it's a little different for everyone, probably.
It is. It's one of those, when you're really getting into it, that's where, if this was a therapy podcast, we would probably have an entire discussion about coping mechanisms and internalized trauma and stuff like that. But that's really where, unfortunately, that kind of shit makes itself feel known, is in those circumstances. And how you deal with it
Hmm.
really does come down to you personally, what you know, that if you start on that slippery slope, that you're going to slide. Alcoholics are a perfect example, where not a perfect example, that sounds really terrible now that I think about that. They are an example of many of them, once they pull themselves out of that abyss, stay dry for the rest of their lives, because they know if they have one, probably going to have two, and they'll relapse again. I'll This one's kind of embarrassing to say. I know that when I am really, 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 really stressed, I have a tendency, if I have those stupid mobile games that are basically pay to win, man, nothing gives you a better dopamine hit than paying money to be better than people on the internet. I will totally fess up to that one, of having some times where I look back at some really, really stressful times and going, fuck, I spent how much? What the
Yeah.
fuck?
Yeah.
Man, I need to stop spending money at 1 in the morning.
But our thing, like, I was talking to my wife about this last week too. Like, our thing is, if it's stressful, we'll go out to eat or like go get something good for food. Like, I mean, it's just a good pick me up.
Hmm. And then you
So,
look back, $6,000, 50 pounds later, and go, God damn it.
yeah, the money is the more short-term impact and the weight is the longer term.
Yeah, so it really, this is It's how do you know? Because there's varying degrees of self-awareness that every individual has. But we all know the kinds of things that get us in trouble. We all know. We just usually don't want to think about it because it really sucks to sit there and go, "Yep, I spent too much money on fucking Raid Shadow Legends. God damn it, they got me."
Yep.
Which also reminds me we should try and get a sponsorship deal from them so I can get some of my own fucking money back. But that knowing the things that we're going to do in those situations, and either sometimes planning for just enough to allow us to cope with the stress. Because
Hmm.
I think it's one of those, if you try to go full aesthetic and not deprive yourself completely of any sort of outlet like that, you're gonna implode pretty much. There's
Yeah.
something's gonna give, you're going to break, and if you bend to get through the situation, but you get through it, that's better than hitting that breaking point in completely, the breaking and going to the strip club with all of your money, blowing everything because you just can't take it anymore.
Hmm.
And it a lot of that comes down to, how do you deal with it. It really is a very personal question of how much rope can you give yourself without hanging yourself. I think everybody has a pretty good idea of how far they can go if they're really honest about looking at, their past behavior and what they like to do.
Yeah.
And then if you know the things are going to be stressful, you've got to have some sort of outlet, whether that's, not to sound all, it's always like, oh, go exercise, go do this. I always feel better after a workout. I don't. I've noticed at times a general uptick, but I'll be totally honest. I've never been one of those where they go, I do a workout and I feel amazing. I go, I do a workout and I feel fucking tired. I don't know what the hell is with the rest of you. If I'm just so psyched on life, yeah. I'm like, I think you got your own other problems that are kind of feeding into this somehow. I wish I felt that good about anything.
Right.
But you've got to have that thing, whatever it is, or let yourself have that indulgence so that you get through it. You get into dieting and they basically say having that cheat day or not cutting out everything fun entirely because you'll relapse
Right.
is really what it gets into. It is your ability to cope with the situation, and
Yeah.
just having some sort of a vague semblance of a plan of how you're gonna blow off some steam.
Yeah. And that reminds me too of a general rule we use in helping clients budget and manage cash flow. And that's giving yourself the permission to spend on things that you enjoy and then cut out the things you don't. So that's the classic way of like breaking your budget, like for us going out to eat sometimes. So we allow ourselves that money to do it every month or however often, but and so you don't do it and then feel guilty and you're like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna just do it 100 times more and not care. So yeah.
It's that point of apathy that I think the real danger hit is once you break that first time, or you test that limit the first time. A lot of people will, and I'm Jesus, am I guilty of doing it myself, particularly in the context of working out. I missed a workout, I'm a piece of shit. But
Hmm.
it's that first break is, I think, where a lot of the danger is of not allowing yourself to basically say, I'm human and I'm gonna fuck up, and
Yeah.
I can just try it again. It becomes a negative feedback loop of, well, I broke this, I was supposed to be disciplined, but now I can't do this anymore, and now I'm all the
Right.
negativity comes just hitting you again at 1 in the morning. You feel like garbage, and then you're de- deep into depression again.
Yep.
I know this is somehow related to what you're not supposed to do with your money, is the emotional impact, but I think the takeaway from this is that, irritatingly enough, everything you do with your money has an emotional component to it, which just irritates me to no end. Personally, whenever I'm trying to make decisions and realizing that my emotional state will play into how decisions view and all of that, and it's just a constant. I've had times where I'm sitting there going, God, this would be so much easier if I could just be a cold, rational being to just
Hmm.
make the best decisions and take these pesky emotions out of it. But we can't. It's, part of the human experience. That's kind of the second one. There is understanding how to you've got to be able to pull your emotions out of your decision making process, and if you can't completely disconnect, be able to compensate for it in some form or another to allow yourself those outs. Otherwise you're gonna break.
Yep.
I think good advice comes in threes. So I think the third advice is just a blanket one. Is this is true for both business and personal? Is stop spending so much fucking money. I mean that becomes the big one on businesses not having accounting systems. This is where we should
Yep.
probably we could have an entire episode on just business finances and all the stuff we've seen. Really, a lot of that just ends up becoming symptomatic of the fact that the business owners don't want to confront what's going on, so they don't want to know what's going on because they know what the answer is and they won't like it. Which to me sounds like a
Yep.
very emotional response to the situation, which I believe goes back to point number two of try and take the emotions out of your decision. See, everything's connected. Everything is a fucking spider web of connections.
Yep. 100%, man. I agree. I think this was really, really good stuff. And yeah, I hope that people are getting some value out of it. And if there's anything we missed or that we, maybe that happens to you that we didn't get to, I would definitely want to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more I know we didn't talk about, even though I'm looking and realizing we've been talking about this stuff for, close to an hour. But I mean, I think, the biggest takeaway I would hope to convey to anybody who listens to this episode really is about that understanding that there is an emotional component to everything. And
Hmm.
if we really want to talk what the biggest mistakes we see people do with their money, it is letting their emotions rule everything and not going on, because that
Yep.
that truly is what drives people to bankruptcy. That's what truly drives businesses into the ground, and that's what makes you lose sight of any plan that you've got. That's what doesn't allow you to, going back to our episode about making decisions, that short circuits the entire incremental decision making process of make a decision, collect data, readjust. Because what it happens is you make a decision, and in that data collecting phase you panic, or you're so stressed about it and you can't think, and then you start making other decisions that aren't based on anything, and suddenly everything goes out the window, and
Yep.
there's no incremental improvement. You're a creature of instinct at that point, and it just fucks up everything. I mean, that is, if we I'm gonna just say it now, if we got to condense everything into one, letting emotions guide your monetary decisions is the worst mistake you can possibly make, because it will kill everything. They won't listen to you, they won't listen to me, they won't listen to anything anybody tells us, because you end up getting so wrapped up in your head. The whole stop spending money, usually a symptom of some emotional component. I'm either feeling really good and we are on top of the world and we've got more money than God. Going back to your example with the professional athletes,
Yeah.
is the number one. It's amazing. You can get paid millions of dollars a year. You start buying 3 dozen Lamborghinis a year, and that money is going to disappear real
Goes away
fast.
real quick.
You're feeling good, man. You're on top of the fucking world. You can buy whatever you want, and suddenly all the money's gone. But that's this episode's takeaway. I know we kind of I think we had a point earlier in the episode, but I want to condense it all into this one, which is just, if you're the kind of person who realizes that you have an issue with that, that's where it's really good to do some additional reading on on emotions and decision making, emotions in money, and that's where you really need to do that intense self reflection to try and
Mhm.
wrangle that, because ultimately all of us have emotions. We all have incredibly strong emotional responses to things. That's part of being human, but We are not our emotions. It is only a part of us. Just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean it's your actual reality and that you have to operate in that reality. You can say, I may feel like garbage, but no, I'm not going to drop another $500 on Raid fucking Shadow Legends because their drop rates are awful. So, so happy episode 6, everyone.
And that's it.
This episode is not sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends because they will probably never give us money after that one. But with that, I think we will let everybody go. If anyone's listening to this and you have something you wish we could talk about in a follow-up to this, please don't hesitate to send us comments, messages, email, whatever, because ultimately we're here to convey, to say wisdom seems a little conceited considering we are both still relatively young, but we also have been through some shit. But just what we have seen and our perspective on things. And Ryan, I'll let you have the closing words here if you have any.
Ooh, I love it. Absolutely, man. I appreciate all the insight, and yeah, I think we did some good stuff in this one. So I don't think we have a segue to our next one, so stay tuned for what the next episode is going to be.
Stay out of trouble, everyone.
And we'll see you then.